May I start, please?
I'm an officer at HMPL course. I've been informed that there's been a car set outside my house all weekend by a prisoner.
And who's made the threat?
Elias Morgan. He's described my family and me to a T. Described my house. Just in fear for my family's life. That's all.
On a cold February evening, the sound of gunfire shattered the routine quiet of a Skelmersdale street. Father of three, Lenny Scott, collapsed outside the gym where he'd been training, his body riddled with 6 bullets. Within seconds, the shooter, disguised in a high-visibility jacket, vanished on an electric scooter, leaving behind a trail of horror and grief. The killing was swift, brutal and deliberate, but this was not the act of a stranger. It was the fulfillment of a promise made nearly 4 years earlier inside the walls of a prison, a promise of revenge. Back in March 2020, Scott was a young prison officer at HMP Alt Course. Known among colleagues as reliable and principled, he was doing his rounds when he stumbled across a contraband mobile phone hidden in the cell of the inmate, Elias Morgan, a career criminal with a reputation for violence. Phones are contraband in prison for a reason. They offer inmates access to the outside world, to criminal networks, and sometimes to secrets that could destroy reputations. When Scott examined the device, he found evidence of something explosive. Morgan was engaged in a secret sexual relationship with a serving prison officer, Sarah Williams. The discovery should have been routine paperwork: confiscate the phone, report the breach, move on. But for Morgan, it was the beginning of a vendetta that would burn inside him. At first, Morgan tried to charm with a bit of cash. He offered Scott £1,500 to balls up the paperwork and make the phone disappear. Scott, however, refused. That refusal is what sealed his fate and ultimately his murder. With the bribe rejected, Morgan turned to intimidation. He threatened Scott's family, warning that their home could be blown up with them inside. He made chilling gestures, pointing his fingers like a gun and telling the officer, "I'm going to bide my time." Scott reported the threats. He told police, "Call handler that you've just heard at the start of this video. I'm in fear for my family's life." He confided in his former partner that he was frightened, visibly shaken by Morgan's words, but he refused to back down. He followed procedure, turned in the phone and did his job. As I said, that decision would cost him his life. So the fallout was swift. Both Morgan and Williams faced prosecution. Williams admitted to 3 counts of misconduct in public office and 1 count of computer misuse in 2023. Morgan was charged with possession of a contraband phone. Scott's role in exposing the device meant he was no longer just a prison officer in Morgan's eyes. He was the enemy. From that day, the phone was seized. Morgan reportedly told Scott he would get him back. However, Scott's own career took a blow. He was actually dismissed from the prison service after battering an inmate during an altercation. By then, he was out of uniform, working to rebuild his life and focused on raising his 3 children. I believe he was working in some type of warehouse. So it seemed as though that this dark cloud on Morgan's threats had passed, but for Morgan, the grudge only deepened. When Morgan was finally released from prison, he set about keeping the promise he had made years earlier. Detectives would later uncover chilling evidence of surveillance, phone records and vehicle data showing Morgan had tracked Scott's daily routine. He learnt when Scott left home, when he went to the gym, when he spent time with his children. The weeks of patient stalking culminated in one carefully planned evening. February the 8th, 2024, Scott left the gym in Skelmersdale after a workout. He didn't know Morgan was waiting. Dressed in a high-visibility jacket, Morgan approached with a handgun, and witnesses later described the moment as terrifyingly quick. 6 shots fired, 1 to the head, 5 to the body. Scott collapsed instantly, fatally wounded. Morgan fled, disappearing into the night. So Lancashire police launched a massive manhunt. Suspicion quickly fell on Morgan. His name had already been linked to the victim, and when detectives pieced together phone data, vehicle tracking and witness accounts, a pattern of stalking emerged. Morgan initially denied involvement, even handing himself in when his name began circulating. He insisted he wasn't connected, but the evidence told a different story. This was not a random attack, this was the conclusion of a 4-year vendetta. A 9-week trial at Preston Crown Court laid bare the details. Jurors heard of the bribes, the threats, the promise of revenge, and the relentless planning. Morgan was convicted of his murder, and his co-accused Anthony Cleary was acquitted of murder and manslaughter. The handgun was never found. So on the night before the shooting, actually, Morgan ensured that there was a van parked at the end of the cul-de-sac a short distance away from the gym. Anthony Cleary, who was said joined Morgan in the dock during the trial, accepted he had delivered the van, which contained an electric Saron bike used by Morgan to travel to the murder scene, but he said he had no prior knowledge about his one-time friend's intentions. As I said, Cleary was found not guilty of murder and an assaultive charge of manslaughter, but the same jury told the court he first knew of the murder when Morgan called him later that night, and he said he'd done someone in Skem. He added he did not report Morgan to the police due to the fears of his own safety. The court was told that Morgan was a man with a reputation of violence, control and revenge, while records held by the prison service and read to the jury revealed he had a history of threatening grave violence, including death threats and punishing people who grass. The court heard Morgan had 5 convictions for 9 offences, including conspiracy to rob, attempted robbery and 2 counts of causing injury by dangerous driving. During sentencing, the judge, Mr. Justice Goose, left no doubt about the nature of the crime. He said this was a carefully planned revenge killing of a prison officer who was loved, respected and made his family proud. So today, Morgan was ordered to serve a minimum of 45 years before being eligible for parole, effectively a life sentence for the 35-year-old. In a victim impact statement, which Mr. Scott's mother told the court, she said, "You just didn't murder my son, you inflicted a lifetime of pain on everyone who loved him. You brought trauma into our lives that none of us deserved, least of all Lenny. You took his life in the most cowardly and callous way. You ambushed him without warning, using a weapon that he could never defend himself from. You didn't give him a chance. My son was everything you were not. He was strong, brave, honest, respectful, hardworking, kind and principled, and he was actually leaving the gym after doing a jiu-jitsu workout. He stood for what was right. You had a weapon in your hand. He did not stand a chance. Listening to your lies during the trial, hearing you twist the truth to make Lenny look bad, only confirmed the kind of person you are. You're an inhumane coward." Mr. Scott's dad said, "Lenny can't be here anymore. However, he was a man of good virtue, hard working, always striving to do the right thing. I was so proud and honoured to have him as my son. He was the most superb dad to all of his children, with the apple of his eye." So this is what people will remember Lenny by, the character that he was. The mother of Mr. Scott's twin boys told the court, "Lenny didn't say what happened to him. He was just doing his job, taking his life so brutally, knowing he had children too. He didn't stop to think for 1 second about his poor babies and the wider impact felt by everyone who loved Lenny." It's hard to have the words to describe just how senseless this is. It was cold, heartless. It was pure evil. And his other former partner, the mother to Mr. Scott's young daughter, said, "This cannot ruin our family. This is the last thing Lenny would have wanted for his children. We all live through his children now, and in Lenny's honour, we will instill the values that he always wished." Detective Chief Inspector Lee Wilson, who led the Lancashire Constabulary investigation, said, "Morgan seems to me to be an incredibly twisted, dark and malevolent soul with a very strong sense of values, but they are values that no sane person would recognise as normal." He added, "This should never happen to any family, let alone a loving family like the Scotts. Everybody has kept their eye on the prize and on the objective of getting justice for the Scott family." Wendy Logan, the deputy head of the Crime Prosecution Service, said, "We were determined to deliver justice and see Morgan brought to book for his evil crime, and our case set out in clear terms how he planned and carried out his callous attack. Our thoughts remain with Lenny's family, particularly his 3 young children, and all those who cared for him as they deal with his loss." So in the end, guys, this is the story of Lenny Scott, and it's about the cost of integrity. Scott could have taken the bribe. He could have looked the other way. Instead, He stood by his duty, even when he knew the danger he was inviting to his life. His refusal to bend, his refusal to be corrupt was what made him a target. To his family, his colleagues, and the community, are going to be remembered as not as a victim of revenge, but as a man who died because of his refusal to be bought, bullied, or silenced. And in his own mother's words, she said, "We will never forget you, and we will always be proud of you." Just want to say rest in peace, Mr. Scott. My condolences go out to your family. It's your boy GC. Keep it locked, keep it real.